Hello everybody, welcome to my presentation, which is called Forget It, Some Store to Remember, Some Store to Forget. My name is Søeren Schaffstein. I'm CEO of DKD Internet Service in Frankfurt, Germany. And when I'm not managing DKD, I'm mostly traveling or perhaps doing some photography, or you will find me in some mountains climbing up or down. And when I have some more time for myself, I might be playing some board games or inventing them. But that's enough of me. Forget It is a project which is done by many partners, and here we see a picture of part of the Forget It team in Thessaloniki, Greece, where they were examining the ocean at sundown and were enjoying forgetting. So, what's the problem? Storage capacity is ever increasing and prices for storage are falling. To get a better picture of that, we first have to answer the question, how large is large? Therefore, I looked up some examples and put them in relation to storage space. For example, a simple text. I took an average Wikipedia article, is about 3.78 kilobytes in size, without markup or anything. If we take lots of text, then we could take the complete Wikipedia, for example. This might be something about 13.5 gigabytes, without markup and images and so on. We can have an average image one of today's cameras would create. That would be about 1.3 megabytes. And we can take an average movie, for example. That would be using a Blu-ray disc, 25 gigabytes, for example. So, when we go back in time to 1955, the IBM 355 had a capacity of 12 megabytes. It would cost you $6,233 to store a single megabyte on this monster of a machine. What you see in the reflection of the picture is a person, and that gives you an idea of the size of this thing to store 12 megabytes. And looking at the examples I gave you, we could store 3,250 Wikipedia articles on this machine. The Wikipedia itself, not at all. 9 pictures, and our video, okay, it wouldn't fit on there. And for a single dollar, we would get 0.16 kilobyte of space on this machine. So that's not pretty much, but time went past, and in the 1970s, IBM brought the 3330, which had a vast amount of 100 megabytes of space, and the price dropped to $259 per megabyte. So now we could store like 27,000 Wikipedia articles and 76 images. That would definitely be an increase. And for our dollar, we would get like 3.94 kilobytes of memory. Cool. But in the 1988, capacity, 30 megabytes, cost $9.97 per megabyte. So the disk itself got a lot smaller, the capacity got a bit smaller, but the price per megabyte decreased rapidly. And now we can store like 8,000 Wikipedia articles, 23 photos, and still no complete Wikipedia or movie on this thing. Let's fast forward and look at 2000. And I bought a Western Digital WD600AB with a capacity of 60 gigabytes. Now we're talking. And the price per megabyte is down to below 1 cent. And now we can store 60 million Wikipedia articles. The Wikipedia itself now fits on this thing, and we even can store 2 movies on that one. Great. And for $1, we would now get 363 megabytes. Even forward 2010, which is not so long in the past, we would also already get 2 terabytes of space, and the cost per megabyte is such a small number now, I have to give you like 5 cents per gigabyte. And now we can store like 500 million Wikipedia articles on that thing and 1.5 million photographs and 76 movies, but with 21 gigabytes per dollar, you see where we're heading. Meaning, if you would store all your 1.5 million pictures on this machine, the problem starts to get shifted into another direction. Which images can you find on this thing anymore? Because it gets so big. And we're talking 2010 now, and today is 2013. And 2013, we have unlimited space. Okay, allow me this joke. Of course, it's not unlimited, but you get the picture. So, that means cool, we can store everything now, so let's do that, but that's not the truth at all. Since there's a lot more cost to storing things, it's not about capacity or the price of a hard disk, there's also the retrieval cost. What does it cost you to get the information back from your disk? The maintenance cost, how much does it cost to keep the system live and running? The indexing cost, as I explained with the pictures, it's important that you find the information on this vast amount of space. And you have to take care of updates, that everything runs smoothly. So we need to keep our information accessible, usable, and useful. And that's why this project ForgetIT came into life. The idea is we need to forget things like the human memory does to keep our information in the way I just described. So let's have a moment in human forgetting. The human brain forgets things, which is a very good thing. And the project works with the University of Edinburgh and the psychological department over there. And they are experts in human forgetting and the human brain. And if we look at how this works, we've brought up a concept for the project which is called memory buoyancy, which means if you look at the fishing line you see in this picture, this shows you from left to right the time that goes past, and from top to bottom the amount of memory you keep in your brain or you can remember. Meaning, over the time, at the beginning, very rapidly you forget details and stuff. Everybody of you have experienced this. And on the contrary, on the other hand, a computer would look like this, because they don't forget anything. And that's why it might be best if we can achieve something like the middle line, meaning we forget only the stuff which is not relevant for us, and drop all the stuff which was maybe relevant sometime in the past and not anymore. So the human brain is a clear helper for us to mimic this behavior in the digital world. Okay, a short overview of the project itself, to give you an idea what it's all about. It's a consortium of 11 partners, and it started this year in February. It's a 3-year research and development project, and the URL is here for you to reference if you want to have a look up later on. And it's founded by the European Union in the 7th Framework Program. They're a very interesting partner in this project, so it's the Center for Research and Technology in Hellas, it's DKD in Germany, it's the Deutsches Forschungsinstitut für Künstliche Intelligenz, it's URIX, it's the Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz University in Hanover, it's IBM in Israel and their storage department, it's the Luleå Tekniska Universitet in Sweden, the Chancellor and Master and Scholars of the University of Oxford, the University of Edinburgh, and the University of Sheffield. So it's experts in all their specific areas of work, and they all together work on this program, and it's very exciting to talk with those people who know their stuff very well. And I believe the first meeting Olivier and I have been taking part was like our brains were exploding, because it was so high-tech everything, and everybody had, there was expert knowledge that was really amazing. But now we've got it, and it's very much fun to work in it. And oh, I almost forgot the Turk Telekom, which is also part in this project. So, why am I giving this talk at the Type 3 conference? Because Type 3 is the CMS the project has chosen to work on in real-life organizational use cases. So I will present you an example later on to show you in which situations when Type 3 is used, the project makes sense and helps you and your clients. Also, Type 3 was chosen because it's open source, and we want to raise awareness on the matter of preservation. That's why we are presenting this here. Of course, we will publish all modules we develop for this project on an open source license, so the outcome of the project can be used by you and the whole Type 3 community as an open source project. Okay, the core concepts of the ForgetIT projects are managed forgetting, meaning we want to have control over what we forget, and not like in the human brain where sometimes we forget stuff we don't want to forget. The second concept is synergetic preservation. That means if we want to remember something, we have to add information to it so that it stays valuable for us and that we can retrieve this information easier in the future. And that's why the third principle of the project is contextualized remembering. So if I tell you something and ask you to remember it, it's a lot easier for you to remember if I attach information to it, making it easier. For example, if I ask you to remember the color of my shirt, and I say just it's blue, then you can remember it or you cannot remember it. That's some 50-50 thing. But if I tell you the color of my shirt is blue, like the ocean in Mallorca and the blue sky outside, now you have more pictures attached to this color, and it's a lot easier for you to remember that. And we're aiming for doing this contextualization in the project and in the computer system. So, when I ask you, do you preserve? Do you keep the stuff you're producing on your website in a preservation state? Not meaning you just do a backup for disaster, but do you keep it in a way that you can retrieve it in the future? So what does preservation mean actually? The definition on Preservation 101 says the protection of cultural property through activities that minimize chemical and physical deterioration and damage and that prevent the loss of information content. The primary goal of preservation is to prolong the existence of cultural property. So it's not only about backing it up, it's about keeping it safe from all possible harm. And what could that be? It could be that you have a storage medium, like the 5¼ disk, which you can no longer access today very easily, because do you have the drive? And even if you have the drive, do you have the connectors necessary to connect the drive? Do you have a system that can work with this drive? And even if you had all this, do you know what's happening inside of this disk? Do you know how it's stored in there? The second thing is the format of the data. I used to use AMI Pro several years ago on my computer, and it was a brilliant software to write text, but nowadays if I had the files left, what would I do with them? It's very difficult to access those files and the information stored with them, like the formatting of my text. Also, the availability of the software or operating system I worked on. Is it still there? Can I do it? If you have something done on OS2 back these days, that's very difficult to work with today. Or possible encryption. If you encrypted your data, can you still decrypt them? Do you know the key? Did you store your keys? And do you know the encryption algorithm anymore? So that's stuff you have to think about, and otherwise you'll be in the digital dark age. It's a term which means the digital dark age is a possible future situation where it will be difficult or impossible to read historical electronic documents and multimedia because they have been stored in an obsolete and obscure file format. And by having a term for this, we also see that it's reality and that it's really important to think about this and do something that our data doesn't get lost in the digital dark age. So, preserving a website is not trivial. that might be the case why we all are not doing it right now, because there's so many questions attached to it. What do you want to preserve? It's not only what you can, because do you want to preserve content only, or content and design, or maybe how often would you want to do it if you have like stock prices on your web page and they change like every minute? Do you want to preserve every single price you ever had on your website, or not? And how about a historical page of your company which changes very seldomly? What would you do with that? That's not something I can teach you how to do, but you have to decide this for yourself. What is valuable for you and what gives you value in the future? How do you deal with browser differences? If your web page looks different in Firefox and Internet Explorer, do you want to keep that as a record for some reason? Is that important or is that not important? And how do you preserve functionality? For example, if you have an insurance calculator where you can type in how old you are and then the calculator tells you your insurance fee will be $100 per month, what will you do with that information? Because you cannot simply make a screenshot of the functionality. And if you store the code somewhere, will the interpreter of the code be available in the future? Can you then still read COBOL or JavaScript or whatever it is? So that comes to the point where we discuss the concept of a preservation value in the consortium. Meaning we need some kind of helper to explain to us and the system this kind of information is worth storing and this kind of information is not worth storing, so we can forget it. And I'd like to give you an example of how difficult this can be because you cannot predict the future. Assume I own a typical German Volkswagen Golf, which has a value of approximately 5,000 euro because I've driven it for quite some time. And I think I can sell this for 5,000 euro. That's nice, that's okay. But what happens if I get promoted to being Pope? Then my Volkswagen Golf in a second is worth 200,000 euro. And that's not something I made up, it happened. The Golf of Pope Benedict was sold for 200,000 euro and it was a used car, normally worth 5,000 euro. And if you had just trashed this car, you would have lost a lot of money. But you don't know this in advance. So you need a system that helps you to prevent as many failures as possible, but still helps you to forget stuff which is not that important and minimize the risk of loss. So, to approach this from a real world use case situation, the project created two different kinds of use cases, private ones and organizational ones, meaning that in the private situation, you all live a private life and do things. And for example, you do photographs on your holidays and you store them somewhere. But in the digital times, it's very easy to do like hundreds of photographs or even thousands. And the personal use case goes around how to organize those photographs and keep them accessible in the future. I will not go into detail because we want to talk about Typo 3 and what we're doing with Typo 3. That's all I will tell you about it. But the German Institute for Künstliche Intelligenz, they will work on this use case. On the organizational preservation side, the typical use cases are looked at in Typo 3. What are the typical stuff we're doing in Typo 3 that need a look from preservation side? So typically it would be digital asset management. Like we buy an image or we take an image and put it in there, and maybe someday it's not used anymore on the website, so what shall we do with it? Things around that. Versioning, of course. Since we edit stuff on the website and it changes, we want to track those changes and we want to have them accessible in the future. Archiving a complete website, I already told you about the difficulties about that, but it's a very relevant thing, especially if you're into finance, for example, and there are legal obligations for you that you have to store the information that was on your website for a certain amount of time. And also individual genres for specific requirements. So we found out in the research we did that different companies have different requirements, and we started to work on an example which is called the press release, because it shows very nicely what's the complete scope of the situation we have there. So this is the one we're going into right now. The others also exist, but it would be too much for this single talk. So let's have a look at the press release. The typical press release consists of a text, an image, for example, some links in your own website and maybe to some external websites, and maybe some attached documents which come with this press release, like logo files, PDFs, whatever. Additionally, there's metadata, like when was the file created, how many characters are in there, when was it stored, who was the original author, and so on. And there might be translation, like from the German version, there's a translation into English or any other language. And once you've published the press release, there's a lot going on around with it, because that's what a press release is for. You want it to be published in magazines, you want it to be published on other websites, you want it to be linked, you want it to be liked, you want it to be commented on, you want it in different browser situations, like on your mobile phone, on your tablet, on your laptop, and maybe you want different formats of the press release, like a PDF and RTF, so that your journalists have it very easy to access. So what you see here is that from a single press release, a huge scope of information was created, and all was at the single source being a press release at first. So that comes to the levels of significance which help us to decide, delete, or to keep stuff. And we have a simple approach to that, and the approach is to say, if we don't find any significance, then we will delete it. And what could be significance for such a press release? It could be the present value, and our action would to keep it because it's actually relevant. It could be a trigger value of some kind that the system thinks it's important and we have to decide manually to do something with it. Then we would keep the press release or the information. It could go to an archive because it's no longer important, but we don't want to lose it, and that could be something of a legal value because the authorities think you have to keep this, for example, 10 years, not with a press release, but for example, if you have receipts of some kind, you want to keep them for the taxes. And if it has an archive value, for example, then you want to keep it in your archive for future reference. So let's go to a more abstract look at this. Our press release comes with some meta information, and all this together, let's call it an information block. And if we want to use this press release in our content management system, we have like 3 different possibilities of using it there. First is we could copy it. Second is we could move it in the content management system. And the third is we could refer to it to an external system. And in the system itself, we have a part of external media, like digital asset management, and we have internal information like content, the structure of your website, and additional information like code and so on. And then we have the output of your content management system. That's how the website looks like. We call this information level 1 because this is everything which happens in your content management system, and you have full control over this. And that's the static level. The second level would be some kind of semi-automatic, like you can enrich your press release with tags, links to somewhere, statistical information about the access of your website, like how many times was this press release accessed by external viewers and so on. We have a third level, which is the dynamic level. What happens outside? As I showed you, it can be referenced, linked, liked, whatever. And we can also imagine a fourth level going beyond all this. And now is the question, what do we want to archive of this cosmos? Is this only the first level, what we create, or do we also want to include the edit information, or do we maybe also want to include everything what happens, like what happens on Facebook, what happens on Google Plus, and so on? Or do we want to go even a step further and include the fourth level? Or do we want to go broader and capture the display information? How was it rendered? How does it look like at this day or the other? And this leads to an interesting thing. If we take all the information and put it in the archive and think about the situation we have with Typo 3, we have Typo 3 CMS at the moment, and we have a brilliant new system called Typo 3 Neos, which is hopefully coming up this year in December, and then we want to move our website over there, and you all know that transferring content from one website or one content management system to another is not the easiest of tasks. So it would be a nice use case if the information from our archive, if stored by standard means, could easily be retrieved into a future content management system. So the project is also aiming for defining a standard of talking to a content repository, which is CMIS for the record. So if we can write an adapter for this storage system, for the CMS we want to use, then we could put the data in one system and access it from another. And that's a very brilliant concept if we can get it to work. We don't know that yet, since the project is only in its first year, but that's what we're aiming for. And this could also mean that we can attach even more systems like image libraries, catalog producing software, and so on, and everything can be stored in one content repository. Talking about the press release again, if we look at the content life cycle of a press release, that would be when does it come to life, and when does its life end some kind of. The typical content or information life cycle would be collect, create, process, publish, analyze, and archive. What does that mean in detail? When I create a press release, I first would collect information, like several pictures, text snippets, and so on, and then take this information and use them in the next step, meaning create, to create a press release from this information, select the ones I want, and prepare a nice press release. After that, I will processes of some kind, like add more information to it, translate it to different languages, prepare everything for release, and give it to maybe the chief editor to have a final look over it, and then everything is fine, and then we can publish it. When it's published, then it's like born into reality. Everybody can see it on our website, and then we want to analyze it to see what happens with our press release. After that, someday, maybe we want to put it in the archive because it's 5 years old and we don't need it anymore. So, looking at this content life cycle, you can attach a lot of information to each stage, like who is working on it, what are the responsibilities, what are the workflows. I could go into a lot of detail here, but I want to spare you the details because it's not relevant. But what is really interesting is what can we do, going back to our example from the beginning, to make our information more useful and more accessible. So we go into the process step and add some annotations here. And what does that mean? It means that already today you've heard the term of semantic web. We can add semantic information to our text. What you see here is that we have various colored labels which are concepts, locations, people, whatever detected in this text, and added with semantics in this case. And we can do this with an image as well. So we can like manually add tags to this image, or we can let the computer do that. And this could be something like, at this point there's cross-channel marketing concept in the text, which is not clear to everybody, so we can explain what is cross-channel marketing. And now you think, okay, I don't want to do this because I don't have the time. And this is the situation where the project aims to do that for you, because we found out it's necessary to do this enrichment of information, because we cannot access the information in the future if we don't add something more to it. But at the same hand, people don't want to do it manually, so we have to find a way to do that automatically. And University of Sheffield showed us their prototype of the automatical detection of semantical information in this text. And they showed a very interesting example. They indexed all the news from the CBC website, and they showed us how they search through these news with the semantic search engine. And it allows stuff like that. If you're looking for example for the German Chancellor, which is Angela Merkel at the moment, and you type it with the search query Google Angela Merkel, you would get articles where words Merkel are in it. But how about if you don't know who is the Chancellor? Then you could also write I want an article with something the Chancellor. And you could also broaden the search and say I don't care how old the article is, and whoever was Chancellor at that time, I want an article where the Chancellor says something. So you can just type in a query that says I want an article about the Chancellor. You would get even text with colon into who was the Chancellor some years back in time. So that would be a very helpful thing. And since you don't have to do this manually, it will be done automatically. Your preserved information gets a lot more valuable and useful for you, because all the things you remember are in your head, and typically you remember the concept, like it was a chancellor sometime, but not the name. Or do you remember all the chancellors in your country back to the beginning? Maybe not. The same with images. We've recently been in Thessaloniki, as I told you, in Greece, and the team of Thessaloniki showed us their automatically detections of images, and was really impressive what they did. They could automatically decide if an image had a good or bad quality, and they even could detect concepts in the image. You've all used Facebook and seen the face recognition in there, and with that, they could create concepts like, I see a blackboard in this image, or I see a presenter, or whatever, and it was really amazing, and I think this will go in this project and help it a lot to have this information attached to images without you doing a single thing. Okay, do you remember? I've put a small game in here, as I told you I like games, and let's play that now. I've like to ask you a few questions about the presentation, and the first one is, which ocean was the ForgetIT team examining? Do you remember what I told you? That is the easiest question. Okay, it was the Mediterranean Sea. And you could have deducted this information. I never said that, actually, because I said it was in Greece, in Thessaloniki, and so on. So that information you could have easily deducted from what I told you. The second question is a lot more difficult, because how many people of the ForgetIT team were carrying a bag? And I would bet a lot of money that nobody except Olivier of you know the answer, because the information is irrelevant for you. But looking at the picture, it's very easy to find out. It's two people. But everybody of you have seen the picture, maybe one or two not, because they were looking into their laptops. But you just forgot it because it's irrelevant. My next question would be, how many barcodes are on the Western Digital WD600AB? You also have seen the picture, but you won't remember. It was 2. But still, the information is irrelevant. And the The most interesting thing is when I ask you how many pictures in the shoebox image are mostly blue. I showed you this shoebox of photographs 3 times in this presentation. And the slide before this one also had it on it. But still, maybe no one does remember how many blue images were in the shoebox. So it's only 1. But again, you have no help for remembering this. So there's no context around this information. It was just in your head as, okay, I've seen a shoebox full of photographs, and that's what's in your head. And if you remember back the memory curve I showed you, the memory buoyancy curve underwater, that's what happens in the first seconds, that lots of information gets lost. Your brain filters it out. And having this billion concepts helps you remember only the relevant things and forget about the unimportant stuff. So what are the next steps in the ForgetIT project, and what are the next steps how you could participate if this sounds interesting for you? We'd love to see you participate in this project, and the easiest thing for you to do would reflect your thoughts with us. So if you feel inspired of what we told you about, just approach Olivier or me and discuss ideas, concepts, questions, whatever you have with us, and we'd be very happy to do that because it helps us a lot to get forward with this project. Then you can take our short survey because we want to know more about how you use the content management system and what you need to archive, what you need to preserve, what's irrelevant for you. It's about 15 to 20 minutes, and it would help us and the project a lot if you took that. I will Twitter the link in a second after the presentation. So just follow my Twitter or DKD's Twitter and fill out the survey. That would be great help. If you can tell us about your use cases, that would be even more helpful. And you could also join to develop features for Typo 3 if you think this is relevant, or you think that would help you a lot. We're working on the digital asset management at the moment and the file abstraction layer. So this also helps the Typo 3 project in itself. Then approach us and we'd be happy to include you somehow into the project. So if you have any questions, don't forget them. But we'd love to discuss them with you, and a beer or two. Just approach us somewhere at the conference and we'd be happy to talk with you. Thank you very much.